Going live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to the shop. Today we have a special guest. Thomas is here with me and we met on email and sent me a question. I said, hey, that would be a really cool opportunity to do a one-on-one. So today, you're really new into hand tools, so we are going to be actually looking at saws. How do you saw straight, how do you follow a line, and how do you cut square so that it's actually 90 degrees to the face. And so I've been trying not to ask him questions and find out where he's at so that we can actually do the teaching here. So in a little bit we're going to start going through what are the problems and issues and how to fix it. Hey, we got a super chat already.
We do.
What do we have on that?
Alan Lewis just super chatted. There's no comment yet. Alan, did you have a comment or question?
Well, thank you for the super chat. Couple things. There are no tool meets coming up immediately. At least I don't think there are. Actually, I don't have anything on the list coming up. So yeah, not that much coming up right now. Other than the fact of if you want the puzzles, this is something that I do if you're newer to the channel. I put out a puzzle once every 2 years. And so this is the third one in the series. And this will probably be going live on the website tomorrow or the next day, so stay tuned. I'll put a post on the Hive Mind, on Instagram, and on the Facebook page. But I only make a small run of these, so if you're interested in it, stay tuned to that. I might do a second run if it gets closer to Christmas and it's sold out yet. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Now, I do have to warn you, they are very expensive because small batch running of puzzles is very expensive. But this is a picture of the shop. And here, I'll show you. And I just got them in today, so I'm kind of excited. Let's see if I can get it without that. There you go. 1,000 piece. And so the nice thing is each one of these then is the shop throughout the ages. So this is 2022. This is 2020. And then we have 2018. So for those of you who are actually collecting them all, good luck. But that'll be coming out here soon. So, I know I get excited about puzzles. So sorry. I don't know if you do puzzles.
Not too much. I think my wife's more into puzzles than I am, actually. So,
cool. We got that. Okay, we're good. So let's actually dive into the thing. So, what problems have you been having with the saw?
yeah. So I mean, this is my saw here, and normally I'll have my piece of wood kind of across the bench like this, and I'll have it clamped down, and so I'll start cutting like this, and I think I'm following my line on the side facing me, but by the time I get done, I have a straight cut down the line, but then I put it on the bench to see if it's square. And it's
so you're talking about like cross-cutting?
Yeah, cross-cutting.
Okay. Well, let's start with that. The first thing I'm going to tell you, whenever you're having problems, is it the problem with the saw? Okay. And the reason for that is it's one of the few times where you can blame the tool. If the saw isn't set up right, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to get a good cut. You're going to be forcing it and fighting it all the time. And I have to say, if you get a store-bought saw, this is going to cause you problems.
Okay.
It's fast, it's efficient, it's great for 2x4s, but when you get into joinery, it's not amazing.
Okay.
But it can work. So we're going to work with this, and I'll probably give you some others to play with.
Okay.
But yeah, when you're first getting into it, all of these are cross-cut, and so for cross-cutting, great. For rip cutting, you're going to run into other issues.
Sure.
First point is make sure that the wood is secure. And you said you had a workstation with the moving jaw vices?
Yeah, exactly. And then I just clamp it on to both of those vices, so it's nice and sturdy. But when I'm sawing, the whole thing shakes. So
and that's really going to be a problem.
Okay.
And so, what might actually be easier is to snag a chair from the dining room.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring you over here to the saw bench, and we're going to try something on here first. So if anyone has questions or something you want to see us do, go ahead and throw those in the chat and we will answer them. And if you're watching this recorded, then look in the description and you'll see all the questions with timestamps beside them. So let's actually come on over here. And we'll switch this over to 3. Grab the saw, yep.
I have a question that's not necessarily related to the saws.
Wait, hang on a moment. Let me just show you this. So I'm going to show you the idea for this. Is number one, if it comes across here, the nice thing about a chair or something that height is I can put my knee on it. Mm-hmm. And now that's a great clamping force. Mm-hmm. Not to mention that, it also allows you to have your arm in line with the saw.
Sure.
And that's one of the key things. You want the saw, the hand, the arm, the elbow, the shoulder, the whole thing to be one straight line. Okay. And so I can set it on here, make sure I'm actually in frame, close enough. And I can set it on here and start my cut, keep it all in line, And I'm a little off, but not bad. And so I want you to give that a try.
So just right leg on the
Yep.
side here. Okay.
If you're right-handed, your handed knee is what holds it down.
Okay. That's good.
Yep. Okay, stop for a moment. Here, hop off a moment. I'm going to turn this so the camera can get a better shot. I'm going to describe something here. So get into the position you're just in. And so if you're having problems with it, your best friend is actually a camera. And you can set it up to have it in line with what's happening. You put the saw in. And what we've got here, I want the audience right there. Wait a second. You can see the elbow here is out away from the body. So pull your elbow in about 2 inches, right there. That's where you want to be.
Okay. Just keep it.
Yep. Okay, wait a second. Now the next thing is your whole body is leaning to your left.
To my left.
Yep, so lean your whole body over.
Okay.
And now the problem is your saw is in the cut, and so your saw is still leaning at that angle.
Okay.
So why don't you pull it out and start a new cut. Okay, wait right there. The saw is leaning out. So,
this way?
no, like, sorry, like this.
Oh, okay.
One of the fears of doing it on the bench is your fear of hitting the bench.
Okay.
Never fear hitting the bench, because it's a bench. It's designed for that.
So am I naturally just
Yeah,
wanting
you're
get
wanting to
out
lean
this
away
way?
from it,
Okay.
and so just think about. Don't worry about the bench.
Okay.
And yet that is one of the more common problems for a lot of people.
Okay. So everything.
Yep,
my arm
that
high
looks
enough?
really good right there.
Okay.
Okay, wait. You just started leaning in again. So force yourself. This is once you actually learn what your tendencies are.
So I'm leaning this way. And
Yeah.
I should be,
Well, no, your body's actually about right,
Body's
but your
fine.
saw is still
saw
leaning
should
out.
be okay like this.
And you're naturally going to be thinking overcompensate. So push it farther than you think it should be. So when your body actually brings it back in, is where it should be. So give that a try. Yeah. Oh, you're leaning a little bit more now.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you're slowly bringing it back in.
Okay.
Yep. There you go. Cool. Nice. Now, that is probably one of the best things is shoot a video of yourself. And it's amazing how you just look at the video of yourself and go, do I really look like that?
Yeah.
And I'll do that to myself. Like I did a short not too long ago. Actually, it came out like 2 weeks ago. And I'm looking at myself afterwards and thinking, because I'm demonstrating and thinking, this is exactly how you should do it. And then I watch it after, it's like, no, your elbow's out a little bit. Tweak that over a little bit. And you'll nitpick yourself to death.
Okay.
But you'll know what your tendencies are. Every time I do a cut, I do this.
Yeah.
I have the same tendency of thinking about cutting that. And so whenever I'm cutting vertically, I'm always thinking, don't worry about the bench.
Okay.
Overcompensate and push the other way.
Okay.
That's one of the things I actually like about this particular bench is sometimes I'll use the slot. And so with the slot, my thought then is I don't have a fear of hitting the bench on either side. Now I can go right down the middle because if I'm not in the middle, I'm going to hit one side or the other. So my thought is make it straight, make it clean. Cool. Let me actually move you out to a different saw then.
Okay.
So come on over to the bench and we'll do a few things over here.
Oh, you want to come around that way?
Yep, come around this way. The saw bench is a great way to. Here, wait, I got a super chat, didn't I?
Yeah, that's what I was
sorry.
going to tell you, but you
Yeah, you can yell at me.
you
I'm
don't
sorry.
breathe, man.
I don't breathe. What do we got?
JS Trucking and Guitars said, evening, I enjoyed that panel gauge replay, and I'm still having issues with my saw going off course unless using a sacrificial straight edge guide.
Ah, yes, the straight edge guide. We'll be touching that in a little bit here, actually, probably after this next little discussion, so stay tuned. Thank you for the super chat. Do you have a mom joke?
What do you call it when your female sibling cries?
What?
A crisis.
Ah.
I was going to say a sissy fit or something.
I like it. Yeah. Okay. Back on topic. The saw bench is great for learning to saw. But honestly, the only reason I use a saw bench most of the time is because I need to make a long rip.
Okay.
I personally just doesn't fit into my skill. I learned most of my skills at the bench. And so I do a lot of my cutting up. And usually whatever you learn, you're going to stick with. Okay. And because I did a lot of cutting at the bench, but I didn't have space for that in my early shop, I didn't use it. But for rip cutting, it's phenomenal because you need to do a long cut. Doing a long cut vertically in the vise is just an absolute pain.
Yeah.
But for learning that arm feel and just having that feeling of knowing your elbow should be this far away from your side and making that swing, it's very, very useful because it's easy to video. But most of the time, if I'm cross-cutting, I'm probably going to be using either a bench hook or I'm going to do it in the vise. Most of the time, I'm going to do it in the vise. Okay. And so I'm going to show you 2 quick techniques for how do you actually cut straight. Okay. And I'm going to do... no, let's stick with that one. Grab this. So here, turn this around. Ooh, don't look down there. Lock. Focus. Okay, so when you're at a bench hook, you can see this top face and this edge. So make sure you put a mark on this because that's what we want to follow, is we want a line. So if this is my reference face, this is my reference edge, I want those on there. But I also want it to be square this way. Oop. To actually stay on the line. So what I want to try and do is I only want to cut on this face and this edge, which is kind of hard to do on the bench hook. So the bench hook is kind of, it takes a little more skill. And don't ever trust the edge because it's always going to wear out over time. You can see this one's gotten pretty wobbly. There was a time when that was a saw curve. No more. And so we're going to start it out over here. And I'm just going to get it in. And then being able to follow the line back across. So I'm not going to let the tip go in any deeper. Okay. I want it to slowly come back across that line. And so every stroke, I'm going to watch the line until I have a fully established curve. Okay. Once I have an established curve, my goal is to come down this edge. And as long as I'm keeping my edge, the side I can see straight, the back side is probably going to be straight. Sure. Provided your arm is in line. So I'm just going to eyeball that line. And in this case, I'm running into my bench there, so I'm going to have to cut this one straight down. And if the saw is true, well, it actually looks pretty good. A hair off, but not by much. Maybe a couple thousandths.
I was really hoping it was the saw's fault.
So here, why don't you give this one a try? Okay. Put a line on here. Yeah, the fun thing is you can flip it over and see which one is this way, is this way. You know, can you see the line? And because there's no tear out on this side, it lets you know you're basically right on the line. Okay. If you see, like on this side, you can see there's a lot of tear out on here. That lets you know the saw was just rough cutting over here. Okay. And so if you see tear out on both sides, that means you went over the line. Okay. If you see the line, that means you went too far the other way. Okay. There. Any questions right now, babe?
Yes, we've had several. Back to when you were first talking about meats and stuff. Alan Lewis wanted to know for Workbench Con in Atlanta in March, do they sell tools like at MWTCA?
No. Workbench Con is a weird conference. It's geared toward the social media maker. And so it's a place for social media people to meet up and mingle and talk with suppliers. So it's not generally for the everyday woodworker. But if you have a YouTube channel or you're ever thinking about having a YouTube channel, all of the classes there are how to improve the social media side of woodworking. So it's a very different one. Here, why don't you give this a try?
Okay, so just top curve, focus on getting that
and then
established.
having this hand clamping this down in place. Move the camera over to this side.
Thomas, it's 10 times harder when you're doing it live on video. I
Yes,
just
it
want you
is. If
to
you can
know.
do it
I
good here.
do
I'm already feeling
understand.
So which side of the line you cutting on?
This side.
Okay. Then you may actually want to
Slide it
move that
over a bit.
over closer to the edge of the kerf
Okay.
and use the side of the kerf as a bit of a guide.
Okay.
I don't know how many times I've blown at the screen watching a YouTube video.
Okay. So
Okay.
that's top.
Yep.
Now I come down here.
Yep. Track it down until you hit it.
What's that?
Track it down until you hit the saw, the hook. There you go. Cool. Now, a couple notes. Here, the saw. When you were cutting, here, why don't you step over that side? When you're cutting, your saw was going from here to here.
Sorry, do that again.
Your saw was going from this position to this position.
Oh, like slanting out.
No, as in you weren't using the full strength of the saw.
Okay, I see.
So you're using like that much of the saw,
Okay.
which isn't a huge issue. And if it allows you to focus on your work, then that's okay.
Okay.
But it's one of those things to think about. You will cut faster if you do a full stroke.
Sure.
Just it's functioned to work that way.
Got it.
And that, that's something I still do. So if I'm really focusing on it, I find my strokes get very small, and that's okay. You're focusing on it. If it helps you focus, it helps you focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you will find it'll be much faster and more efficient if you use the
Long
whole saw.
strokes.
You paid for the whole thing, so why not use it? Okay. Look how clean that is.
That's great.
So let's see.
Moment of truth.
Dead true.
It's looking good.
That's actually better than my cut. That's gorgeous, man.
Awesome. Wow,
That's-
thanks. That's
One
probably
stroke on
my
the,
first straight. You know what's funny? I noticed myself. I would cut a certain way, and then I would do the overcompensating thing, and cut the other way, and I haven't gotten like a truly straight cut. This is great. This is
Let me take this to another step then.
Okay.
So we're going to do this one in the vise, which will probably be a little closer to what you do. And I find in the vise, here, let me just do 2 lines one here. 1 and 2. After this, we'll look at some ripping.
Okay.
Please only
questions,
do
Ed?
the saw variety.
Did eat beans before this, so let's get to specify that for sure.
Yes, Warren, we are still technically owed a mom joke from
Oh, that's right, we
the
had
super
2.
chat earlier. Okay, let me see if I have one ready. Although my bean joke could have kinda.
I have a couple dad jokes in mind, but both of them are for the short video that'll be coming out next week, so I can't tell them already.
Some of these I've said already, so I'm trying.
Now, usually, you got it, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Usually, this is my preferred way to crosscut, and I find myself doing this more than anything else, which it's kind of odd because the bench hook is so nice for it, but I like the security of this and not having to actually hold anything.
Yeah.
It allows me to focus a little bit more on it. So I'm going to do basically the exact same thing here, is I'm going to start this, and bring it back, establish that curve, and the nice thing about this is now I can cut all the way down to the corner. So I can cut corner to corner without doing anything else. And here I've cut from this corner to this corner, only cut on the lines I can see.
Okay.
Then I can just take the board, flip it over, and repeat. And now I'm only cutting, and this makes it much easier because the kerf is usually just started. And now I'm only cutting on the lines that I can see. And so if you're ever having a problem following the line or flipping around, it's nice to be able to just cut on that line.
Sure.
Why
Yeah.
don't you give that a try?
Okay. So can I ask, you never, well, do you ever start from the top and just bring it all the way down? Because I would have my board, well, I would be over my board like this and then bring it down like this. But do you normally just
Yeah, no,
establish a curve
you
here?
almost always cut face.
Okay, okay. That's
Because if you're going to be off square, it's going to be, I mean, you can be off square in the short face a little bit. But that's usually pretty easy to clean up.
Yeah, sure.
Being off square in the long
It's
face
just too
is the
much
more
distance.
important one.
Okay,
So if you're cutting on the long face, then you have far more accuracy in your cut.
okay.
You got the mom joke?
I do.
What is it?
What's the opposite of lady fingers?
What?
Mentos.
Hey, here's an issue. Right now you're cutting corner to corner here, this way, and you can't see this line.
Okay.
So think about making it flatter earlier. There you go.
Oh.
Yeah, see, this is where you cut all the way through on the other
So
side
I should have
first.
stayed at the top.
Yep.
Okay.
Because you can't see this line.
Yeah. Should I just keep going?
Yeah,
and try
keep
to-
going. Yep. Try and bring it over. And because you're really only off by a couple shadings from the shooting board, so. So that's probably why. Okay, that's. Here, let me show you. I don't know if you guys can see this. So I mean, we're off a little bit, and it's about 1/16 of an inch, which I mean isn't a huge issue. A couple passes in the plane, and you're right back to where you want to be.
Okay.
And so the reason I like doing that is I'm not always cutting a 1x3. I'm often cutting something that's like 6 inches by 4 inches. You know, a beam or a 2x or something larger, and so it makes it much easier to cut a long face in both directions.
Yeah, sure.
The problem is, when you're cutting that way, it requires your saw to go down this way. And it's hard to cut like that. And so I have this natural tendency, my body just goes down with it.
Okay.
And I actually hear me flip over to this one. It's one of the reasons why I love clogs, is that I'll get into a position and it actually just rides up on the toes. I don't know if you guys can see that. And so
It's a little
I'll be up
blurry,
on the toes of them, and they actually support my weight down here. And so I get this position going up and down with the clogs. And so that makes it very, very easy to do that. But this is one of those things where you're going to find a way that you like to do. Do you like to cross-cut at the bench? Do you like to cross-cut at the hook? Cross-cut in the vise? Experiment, have a little bit of fun.
Okay.
What time is it? 20. Oh, okay, we're doing great. To do ripping. Any questions?
No, but I'm learning that everybody in the chat is a bunch of coffee addicts.
Okay. Ripping is where the real fun comes in, because if you can master ripping, then you can master anything. So I'm going to take this and run it down the board on both sides. And so the problem with ripping is I can't go corner to corner ripping. Otherwise, it'd be a pain this way. Now, these are crosscut teeth. So if we try to rip with this, it's going to be a pain.
Okay.
Because crosscut teeth love to grab the grain and they go all over the place.
Okay.
So you can rip with a crosscut. And I'd rather rip with a crosscut than crosscut with a rip cut. But it's not meant to do it, and it doesn't do it very well. So this is Atkins 5 PPI. It's a little on the dull side, but not bad. This is a handsaw, so it's extra long, as opposed to a panel saw would be that long.
Okay.
So 2 inches makes it a handsaw. And the most efficient way to do this is in the saw vise.
Okay.
But I'm going to explain it up here because it makes it a little bit simpler to understand. When cutting in the vise, always tip it away from your little whip.
Okay.
The reason being is if all the fibers are standing up perfectly and you come in to cut them, all those fibers are sticking up into the saw. And that's going to cause the saw teeth to catch.
Okay.
And it jams up on you. If they're leaning away, then they're not going to stick up on the teeth and it can slide through them easier.
See.
Then, when you're ripping, at this point, it's going to be the exact same thing you had before. And so we can start it out. And then at this point, it's that same mechanic again, and finding that position where you can, actually let me turn this camera on so you guys can see this. Oop, focus on that. There we go. And 3. So with this, it's that same feeling of making sure the saw is in line with your hand and in line with your shoulder. And I can't see this, so I don't know if I am or not. Once you do, it's fairly straightforward.
Are you still are you wanting to angle up like this or just straight?
No, at this point I'm just cutting straight down.
Straight down, okay.
Because coming up at an angle isn't going to cause, if I'm doing resawing with a large surface, I could come up at an angle.
Okay.
And then I can flip the board around and come the other direction. But because it's only 3/4 inch thick, I'm not going to be able to do a corner to corner angle.
Gotcha.
And so this is all about keeping track of where your shoulder is. And how far off the line am I? A little ways, but not much. So my saw is actually leaning a little bit that way.
Okay.
So I'm a little farther away from the line than I normally want to be. But that's something that, yeah, it takes a lot of skill to make the back of the line perfect. It can be done.
Okay.
And that's one of those things with the camera, the more you watch it, the more you'll see. But it's also one of the reasons why I like to do it in the saw bench. Now, one of the problems you're going to have when you're doing this is that eventually you're going to get off the course. And it's going to go off one way or the other. And the reason it does that is your saw is twisting. So the handle is there so that you can actually steer the saw. So actually grabbing the plate and twisting it. So if it's in here, I'm actually going to use my hand and I'm going to twist it one way or the other. I can bring the teeth back on. The problem with that is I'm only twisting my side of the blade. The back side of the blade I have no control over. And so that becomes a problem. So if your saw starts to get off the line, don't try and twist it back onto the line. Back up to where it was a problem, and at that point, twist it.
Sure.
And then you can clean it up at that point, so you're fixing your line.
Okay.
So why don't you give this a try?
Okay. Just down the same line?
Yep.
Okay.
Having the kerf set up will make it a little bit easier.
This is a long saw. All right. Doing all my checks right now to see if I got mechanics down.
Okay. Here's one thing that's going to happen. As you come back, as you go forward, your elbow comes out.
Okay.
And so think about keeping it tucked in. But at the back, it's in the right place. It's when you come forward, it's pulled out.
Okay. So when I come forward like this, I go like that?
Yep.
Okay.
So just think about it coming in. Yeah, that's a lot better.
That rumble I hear, like coming back, is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, that's good. Yeah, you got that now.
It's looking good?
Yeah, and honestly, you were really nice and true. Now, at this point, I don't know if you can see it, but you're just coming over touching that line. And back up here, we're just a hair away from it. So that means you're starting to come over this way.
Okay.
And that is one of the inherent problems with Western saws. In the Western saw, you have all the control. And any slight deviation in your hand, your elbow, your arm, your shoulder, anything will cause the saw to move.
Okay.
With a Japanese saw, the teeth go the other direction and the leading tooth is on the other side. And you don't have any control over the other side.
Okay.
So it will, as long as you set it up right,
Where you
it will
set it.
track.
Okay.
The problem with that is if it doesn't track or if you didn't set it up right, you have no control.
Hard to move it, yeah. Okay.
And so with the Western saw, it takes a lot more skill to learn. But once you do, it becomes intuitive. It's something it becomes very, very hard to teach, in all honesty, because it's one of those things of, you just cut it, you know? But getting to that point can be difficult, and it's all about learning those fine body mechanics. So let's go over to the saw bench.
Okay.
And one of the last things I'm going to go over is starting the saw. Because that can, if you don't start it right, it's going to be a problem. Now when at the saw bench, can you hit the number 3? Hello, people. Let's bring this back down here. At the saw bench, it can be kind of hard to hold on to. There we go. Because when it's across, you can put your knee beside it.
Right.
When it's this way, your knee is actually on the cut.
Okay. Yeah.
And so your body is now in the way. And that means your arm is going to want to woggle in and out. And so you have to be able to cut, but you have to get your body out of the way so that my hip is over here and I'm kind of leaning at an angle.
Okay.
But then that means my whole body is thinking about going that way.
Right. Right.
So I have to teach myself to overcompensate that way. So it's one of those things of, I'll bring it back on track here. So I'm just twisting it over, scratching. I'm using the set of the teeth to actually kind of scratch it over the side. Just a hair off that line. And then, in this case, now the nice thing about this is I actually like to have my hip here out of the way. Let me see if you guys can actually see this. Let me come up a little bit more. There we go. So I have my hip out of the way, but my head will come over it. And my head eyeballs down the saw. So I know if my saw is straight. And I can see the legs in here, and I can keep my saw parallel with the saw, so it can see a little bit more if I'm tipped. But that means my whole body is contorted. So my hip is over here, my shoulder's over here. And so it's one of those things where it takes a whole lot of learning to do that. But if you watch yourself in a video, it ends up looking like and you can go pretty quickly.
Okay.
Here we start this way for you. Make it a little bit easier to. Let's actually start you off straight then. There we go. Why don't you give it a try? Now your elbow's going out a little bit again. There you go. Okay, here's something. When your elbow comes back in,
Like
then your hand goes out.
Okay, so when
So-
I'm pushing back in.
No, like when you're keeping your elbow in, your elbow's where it should be, but your hand comes over.
Oh, okay.
So you're almost twisting it back in.
Okay.
So think about your hand coming out just a little bit.
Okay.
There you go. That's nice. Then blow the dust off and make sure you're on track still. And if you're not on track, then just give it a light tweak because you're just a hair off. So you're still within the range of being able to correct it. There you go.
I feel like I have to check something every
Yeah,
second.
yeah. Nice. Okay, let's call it there. And this is one of those things where you could do this for hours.
Yeah.
And they used to have, there was a show called Woodworking in America, and they had the hand tool Olympics. And this was one of the big skills, is the thing was you had a pine 1x 3 foot long, and the goal was to rip a line, so you'd have a mark come in 3/4 inch, you'd rip the line, and then you'd plane it.
Okay.
And so you would then plane it and say, yes, this is good, it'd be hand off to the check, and then they would put a straight edge on it, and they would check it with playing cards. And every playing card they could fit under it was a certain amount off your time.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun because if you could get accurate with this and you could do it in 1 or 2 plane passes, it could be fast.
Yeah.
And it was a great event for actually teaching it because you get so many different skills with it. Because once you can get this down, sawing is the beginning of all hand tools.
Sure.
If you can saw straight, the planing is so much easier. The chisel work, the joinery, everything, measuring is so much easier if your saw just works. And so if you can spend time doing this, shoot some videos of yourself, it's amazing what you can see.
No, I didn't realize how much was off. Like the natural way I want to saw, and as you're correcting me, everything about it is, well, when you correct me and bring my body back into position, it feels so unnatural right now. Everything feels, I feel like I'm looking like this, but you're saying I'm straight when I feel like I'm doing this. So yeah.
You'll have fun going back to watching the recording.
Okay.
Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is starting the cut.
Okay.
So for that, I'm going to come back over here to the bench. Throw another scrap in here.
I'm not sure anybody in the chat is honestly paying attention. We have gone down the rabbit hole of coffee and French presses and suggestions for melody and
That makes me feel a little better.
A lot of people just come to the live to hang out with Sarah in the chat group. And okay, let me grab a back saw because these are often a little bit harder to start. Back saws have a heavy brass back.
Okay.
And so when starting a saw, the easiest way like you do it is just to pull it back. And that generally works. But if you can learn to push it forward, then you're going to find several other things you learn about saws. So let me flip over to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pinch the board so that this saw slides against my thumb. And so those of you know it's sliding, so my thumb is the guide over here. And so with it pinched against it, now I can push it side to side with my thumb because my thumb can micro adjust it. And as long as I can let it slide without actually cutting the wood, I want to lift it up off of the wood. Backed it up too far, hit my thumb. I want to hit it so I'm not cutting the wood at all. And then I just let a little bit of weight down on, and I'm cutting. And to be honest, the speed of cutting isn't going to be much difference between a back draw and being able to start on the front cut. If you can do one's not faster or better than the other. But what being able to start on the front stroke teaches you is how to hold the saw and how to run the saw.
Okay.
Because what you want is you want the weight in between your middle finger and the back of your hand.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, with this one, the weight has to be your index finger, and there is no hook for the back of your hand. So this isn't going to be able to teach you how to do that. And that's why this is probably the most valuable, the most useful thing in the entire saw is this back hook. Because what that allows you to do is it allows you to adjust the pressure you put onto it.
Because it hooks on here?
Yep, it's just balancing on there. So it's between the middle finger and the hand back here.
Okay.
Balances the whole thing.
Okay.
And so I could, without actually grabbing the saw, a little more stability, start the saw without actually grabbing it. Just letting that be on there because I can control how much pressure I'm putting into it. And if you can control how much pressure you're putting into it, the saw will cut more efficiently.
Okay.
If you are putting pressure in it, so if I grab this saw and I'm going to squeeze it until my knuckles are red, number one, that's going to cause the saw to turn. So if you squeeze it, the saw turns. So the looser your grip is, the more the saw is just going to do what it's want to do. And if the saw's set up right, it'll go.
Okay.
If you're gripping it, you're telling the saw, go that way. And so being able to have a loose grip does that. Number two, it allows you to control the saw. So if you actually need to do small adjustments, if you're really gripping it, it becomes hard to do. If you have a light grip, just slight tweaks in the way your fingers are on it can do a huge amount to this.
Sure.
But again, when you're learning, any slight change causes the saw to go all over the place. So it's kind of a catch-22. What's the other one I was going to say? Lightning, time. I don't remember what it was. Apparently it wasn't important. So being able to run the saw just above the work and just kind of scratching it without letting the saw actually dig in is a great skill to learn.
Okay.
And so I'm just getting this like scratch mark on it. And what I can do there is now I just tell the back of my hand, give it a little more pressure. And so all the weight is on there and I just let it pivot a hair more forward and then I'm cutting. So here, why don't you give it a try. And feel the difference between a saw that's not intended for your hand and a saw that is intended for your hand.
So I could...
Yep, just the middle finger and the back of your hand. You can kind of feel it bounce back and forth in there. So to start off, put all your fingers in. And then pinch the edge of the board, thumb and finger. Let it slide on your thumbnail.
Just like that?
Yep. And try not to let it bite. Just try to let it zip right over the top. Get as close as you can without it actually cutting in. And if you feel it going away from your thumb, then you can use this finger to push it back towards your thumb just a little bit. Just put a little bit of pressure on your thumb. And so between your thumb and the index finger, you're guiding its lateral movement.
Now, remind me, this exercise is teaching you the weight, just the main weight between
how to hold the
metal.
saw, how to grip it, and how not to put pressure into it.
Okay, gotcha.
Because if you're really cranking into the teeth, a lot of times the teeth will catch. And if the teeth catch, a couple things can happen. Number one, you can get sawdust that actually builds up around the side of the plate. And if it builds up on the side of the plate, it's going to push the plate one way or the other.
Gotcha.
If you ever resawed a board, you can be on your line on your side, on your line on the other side. When you open up the board, there's a big curve inside. Oh. And that's a lot of times because you're just pushing too hard. You want to let the saw do the cut. If you're putting down pressure into it, and there's a reason why it's canted forward. It's harder to put down pressure. It's very easy to put up pressure.
So with my saw, I can't do this exercise necessarily.
You can. It's going to require more gripping of it.
Okay.
And so then once you have it,
I feel like this is Mr. Miyagi wax on.
honestly, once you get the grip down, and at this point you can start then adding in the other things. You can add in your elbow, add in your shoulder, think about your hand in line, and just think about what your body is doing. It's amazing how your body just learns it and it clicks one day. And all of your saw carves are going all over the place, and the next day you come to it and it's just like, oh, now it's working. I don't know what I did. It's just learning the skill.
As you're watching me, my elbow going popping out again? Or?
Let's see from the side. Yeah, your body's actually a little way, so step just a hair a little farther this way. There you go.
This?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you put just a little bit of downforce onto the saw, it suddenly catches. Now that you have a kerf in line, if your arm's in line, then the saw cut's perfect. Okay, let me show you the next thing then. Oh, we got a super chat?
We do.
Let me cover this and I'll just get that. So the next thing is, now you're letting the saw do the work. But it's a little slow. If you want to go faster, then you can put down pressure into it. But knowing how much down pressure is too much is kind of the key. And so with this, now I can, let me start one here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 cuts, 8 strokes.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things of just being able to learn how much. And I can't explain it, other than the fact I know that if the saw is this long and my stroke is this long, I can put this much force into it.
Okay.
If the saw was longer, I can put more force into it because there's more teeth to hold it.
Okay. So like more stability, the more teeth there are? Or
well, no, the not more teeth, the size of the teeth. The bigger the teeth
okay.
are, the more space there is for dust to go into it.
Okay.
When you're really forcing it down in there, you're loading all those teeth with it. And if you force it too hard, then the dust is going to build up on either side of the plate and it's going to jam it. And anytime it jams it, then your body goes weird, or it may cause the to go off. Mm-hmm. But learning how much is too much is... I can't say, this size tooth, this length of saw, this particular wood is going to cost this. It's just one of those things you've got to kind of feel.
Yeah. Okay.
And so once you can get that down and you get your grip down and you can stabilize the saw, then try pushing into it and learn, oh yeah, it jammed up on this. Maybe I should try it a little lighter on this one. Or, oh yeah, I can really crank this one down.
Sure.
And I know with my 5 PPI, this thing I can put a lot of weight into because those teeth are so big, they can hold a lot of dust. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then if I go up to my frame saw, which is a 3 PPI, I can really crank that sucker. So yeah, that's kind of the main skills of saw work.
Okay.
So I think we'll turn it over to questions. If you have any for me.
Well, we technically owe Troy a mom.
Oh yeah, I gotta turn that off. What we got?
Well, Troy said this is for the coffee pot fund.
So that goes for Melody, right?
I know. I said Alan used to donate to the Sarah's Hot Cocoa Fund, and that's no more over than that. Just tease. It's not really hot cocoa weather either.
Not yet.
So
We did get a frost the other day.
a frosty. No, I was telling them how Bubblers is like my new favorite drink.
Yes. Yes, she has lots of bubblers.
Do either of you do just straight up black coffee or?
I can on occasion.
Yeah.
I don't drink much coffee because she doesn't even like the smell of it.
Oh, you oh.
Highlander
one of those
grog smells okay, but no.
So what's the mom joke?
What is the price of a chimney?
What?
Through the roof.
That one's a good one. I like that.
Or you could say nothing because it's on the house. I was ready in case you answered one of those. I had.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Okay, yeah.
All right,
So what
we
questions
do
we got?
have other questions. Are you do you have other stuff you're going to show? Or
Yeah, well, there was one right at the top that I added before. Did we hit that?
Cosmin had asked, with respect to sawing, though, I'd be interested in how imperfect of a saw can you get away with in terms of a slight bow in the blade, too much saw set, etc.
Yes, that's one of the things with how do you know if it's a saw or not? And the best way to tell is to do that where you're just lightly holding it. Let the saw do what the saw wants to do and see where does that curve go. If that saw goes straight, the saw's good. If it starts to go off to one side or the other, there's problems with it. And as to the question of how much set, how little set, that's really up to the individual person, because I have basically the bigger the teeth, the more set you want. But how far out they are is kind of a personal thing. If you have a lot of control over the saw, teeth that are out a good ways, you can overcome it. But if you're first learning, having teeth that are out any amount is just bonkers because you don't know. Is it me? Is it the saw? What's going on here? I can't figure it out. And if the saw is doing it, it's hair racking. There's a reason I don't mean hair.
I was
So how much is very personal and depends on the saw. If you are a beginner, I usually say put more set into the teeth. The more set you have, the easier it is to change the saw because it's cutting out a big curve and your plate has movement in it. So it gives you an easier control over it. As you get more into it, you're going to want less and less and less set because the less set, the less wood you're removing, the less work you're doing, the faster the saw goes. Also, the cleaner the cut. So it's kind of one of those things, if you have big teeth, you want big set because you're removing a lot of material. If you're doing fine work with a dovetail saw, you almost want no set at all. You just want it to just clean. And so, yeah, everything's going to be a little bit different. So what's that super chat?
So Gary Leonard is also saying coffee fun, and then what about how to use a gent saw?
Oh, gent saws. The most worthless, stupid. Ugh. Okay, I'll show you how to use a gent saw. I'm on 4. Okay, watch this. Trash can! No. In all honesty, with a gent saw, you're holding it kind of like you hold a file. So finger forward on top of it. And in this case, the weight is still the middle finger, but rather than being on the back of the palm, it's in the palm of your hand. So it's resting on there. So it's much the same way as that, except for it rotates really easily. So it's hard to get a smooth control on it. And so you have to actually hold it up a bit more. And this one's bad. Of course I threw the good one in the trash. And yeah, it's much the same thing. It's just a different way of holding it. Same thought, same principle, just less control. These are great for dovetails. Number one, you don't have to cut so far. Number 2, you're probably going to come in with a chisel and clean it up. So if it's not perfectly clean, then oh well. And number 3, these are cheap. You can buy these very readily. You can buy them easily, but I never use them except for demonstrating and showing things. And I know I bruised a lot of people's egos. I'm sorry. Started a few arguments. I know there's a lot of people out there that love these things, and I don't know why.
It was not a very gentlemanly reaction.
Yeah, gent saws are not my favorite. What's next?
Oh dear. Okay, I don't know that we're going to get through any newer questions. We're not going to get to, and I'm hoping we get through what I've already pulled out.
Cool.
So, send James a message if you want your question answered. Ken Carlile asks, I'd like to hear about the ergonomics of doing various sawing operations. When to do it on the low bench or saw bench, and when to do it on the bench top.
Most of the time, it's just personal preference. I taught myself saw working mostly in the vise. And so almost all of my cuts are done in the vise. All my joinery cuts are done in the vise. Almost all of my cross cutting is done in the vise. The only time I take it over the saw bench is I need a long rip. And that's just my personal preference. A lot of people do almost all their work in the bench hook. All the cross cutting in the bench hook and all the ripping down on the saw bench. And ergonomics, you'll hear a lot of people talking one way or the other that this is more ergonomically available than that, and why leaning over the saw and coming down is not. And in all honesty, it should be the exact same body mechanics, the exact same ergonomics, whether you're vertical or you're horizontal. Your body is, from the waist up, is all in the same place. It's just pivoting at the hip.
Right.
So if you're so if you're sawing at the bench, you should have the same waist up body mechanic that you have at the bench leaning over. And so it should be the exact same thing. It's just a different position of your body. What's next? What was that comment?
Nothing. You look like a seesaw. And
I wasn't
Thomas,
prepared
I
to
think,
do
was
dancing.
getting scared.
I know. I wasn't prepared to do dancing back here. Just wanted to cross cut.
Yeah. On that note, I do have to put in one caveat. I find that sawing at the bench, I twist my body a little bit more when I'm ripping, because a lot of times my knee has to be in line with the cut. Whereas when I'm at the bench, I can get my body out of the way, and so it's much simpler to do that. But from the waist up, it's all the same. It's just where my knee is in relation to it, and I find that
That's another dance move. Now put it together.
dance moves with wood by Wright.
8-step routine. Let's go. There's a short for
Was
you.
it any shorts? Yeah.
What's next?
This is why James doesn't need coffee. David Walcott asked, what kind is a better sharpener? Diamond or oil/water stones? If it's oil, aluminum oxide, or silicate carbon?
There is no better. They're all equally good. They all have their pros and cons. In the end, it really comes down to your personal style. Actually, go take a look at Rex Kruger. He just had a video coming out, or it should be coming out very soon. I think it was just released to patrons. And he's actually going over a bunch of different sharpening styles and pros and cons and what's for them. Really, really good video on it. And it really just comes down to personal taste. They all do it well. Some do it a little faster. Some do it a little bit cleaner. I use diamonds because they are fast, they're efficient, they're flat, they're done. I don't have to think about it. There's no mess. There's no fuss. They're great. Sandpaper is really cheap and easy to get into in the beginning, but it will get expensive over the years. Whetstones require you to have a lot more patience. They're a little slower. You have to do more prep and cleaning with them. Oil stones, they're all pros and cons, but it really just comes down to personal preference. If you want quick, fast, and efficient, diamonds. If you want zen focus and just absolute perfect, water stones. If you want that halfway in between, a little of both, oil stones. And then there's sandpaper and other things that come into it. There are so many different styles because there are so many different woodworkers. No one is better than another. Just, try and figure out what type you are and go for it.
should have like one of those BuzzFeed quizzes. Like,
Yes.
What
What
sauce?
Harry Potter character are you?
But all about your woodworking tools.
Yeah.
There you go. Can sort into houses. Okay. Anyways, Jerome Ulrich wants to know: can we get some tips for resawing by hand with a panel/hand saw? Did we already get that?
Yeah, that's what the ripping down
Okay.
was.
Sorry, that was a
Yeah,
question
and
from a
when
while ago.
When it comes to the actual sawing, the body mechanics, whether it's a back saw, a panel saw, they're all the same. It's the same balancing of grip. Even when you're vertical, it's the same balancing of the grip. It's the same elbow, arm, shoulder. Get your body out of the way. The exact same thing, whether it's a big saw or a little saw or a back saw. Unless it's a gent saw, then you're doing it wrong. Or, once you get into Japanese saws, then it's a whole other thing. And maybe I could do another video sometime with that. But yeah.
All right, TroyJ wants to know: are we going to see the frame saw?
Probably not tonight. That's its own ball of wax. Because with a frame saw, you're sawing with your body just as much as you with your arms. So in that case, you're not worrying about it all being in line because it's all locked together, but your arms are going in and out with the whole body movement.
Dance movement.
Yeah. Getting extra for your money tonight, folks.
You notice they're not super chanting for the dance. Oh, hang on. Ken Carl, Jerome's question was specifically about resawing, which I don't think James covered.
Which one was that?
The one I deleted because we said we covered it. I don't remember. It was a question from way earlier.
Oh, with the
in
panel saws?
No, I don't think so.
Sorry.
Send James a message. I'm
Yeah, send me an
sorry.
email and I'll get back with you. What's next?
Let's see. David Walcott asked, what is the purpose of a carcass saw again?
So a carcass saw, well, for instance, you have dovetail saw, the smallest back saw, little tiny teeth. Then you have the carcass saw, then the bigger sash saw, and then you have the tenon saw, the biggest of the four. The sash saw and carcass saw are both rip teeth. The only difference is one is bigger than the other. The carcass saw is a little more controllable, but is great for pretty much any cross-cutting joinery. The tenon saw and the carcass saw, with those two you can do just about anything. The sash saw, you can do anything the carcass saw can do. The problem with the sash saw is it's bigger. It's longer, it's heavier, it's deeper. That means it's going to take a little bit more to control. So if you're having problems controlling carcass saw, if you got the sawing done and you want to get a lot more, sash saw. But they're cross-cut and they're basically your joinery saw. Any cross-cut, so like the shoulders of tenons, cutting out the slots in a half-lap joint, shoulders, that's what the carcass saw and sash saw. And honestly, out of all the saws, that's the most used in my shop. I used to say it was the carcass saw until I got the sash saw from Jared Green, which I am absolutely in love of, and now this is by far the most used saw in my shop. But yeah, get one of those two, and it will be the most used saw. The dovetail saw, everyone says, ooh, I should get a dovetail saw. I use that maybe 1% of the saws in the shop. Number 1, it's the carcass or sash saw. Number 2, it's the big rip hand saw. Number 3, it's the tenon saw. And there's several other saws, and then you finally come down to the dovetail saw. So, yeah.
Okay,
What's next?
so back to the resawing with a panel saw. Tips.
I have several solid videos on that, and so I'd say go see that. The biggest thing with resawing is, number 1, you want the board leaned away from you. So you don't want it vertical. You don't want the teeth catching into it. You want it leaned away from you. Number 2, you want to cut diagonally. So you're only cutting on your side of the line. And once you cut down a little ways, if you're cutting across this way, then you turn the board around and then you cut the other way. So then you're only cutting on, cut this way. So you'd only be cutting on your side. And once your saw cut kerf gets down to the point at which it hits the other side, then you turn it around and you go the other side. This way you're always cutting the line. The most important thing is, though, don't force the saw. you're going to get to the point where you're almost there and you really start cranking into it, and you'll notice that the saw actually gets harder to push as you get there because you're really cranking into it. And what's happening is you may be exactly on your side of the line, and you may be exactly on the line on the other side, but in the middle of the board it goes weep. That's because you're forcing the saw. Let the saw do its work, and that's probably the most important thing. It's hard to do with it because you're doing a large section, but you're going to get a lot of dust that can clog up in there. So let the weight off of it and let the saw cut it. You'll get a much, much, much cleaner cut.
Got one more.
One more, okay. One big one.
Matt Tomon asked, what do you use to lubricate the saw plate with?
I use a wax oil mix. I really like this one. I've used the oil in the can, which is kind of a lot of English woodworkers use that. I've used straight beeswax. Straight beeswax gets a little bit gunky. Oil in the can just rubs off really quickly. You get like 5-6 strokes and it's gone. And I kind of like the halfway in between. So this is, let me get this right, it's 2 parts beeswax to 1 part raw linseed oil. And I've got several videos on how to make paste wax, and I actually go over the recipe on this. But if you want to use the exact same stuff I get, it's actually available on my website, woodbywright.com. And I sell, here we are, canisters with your very own puck of paste wax that I've mixed up. And so it's the same thing I do with that. A lot of times what you'll have is the saw starts to bind up on the cut. There's tension and it pinches, or the teeth aren't quite right and it's pinching. You put a little bit of wax on there and it's amazing how just fast it suddenly cuts. So yeah, paste wax, that's what I use.
But he doesn't ever let you use it when he's teaching you how to saw.
Well, you don't need it if it's going straight and clean. You only need it if it's actually binding up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Half of the videos I watch, I see how far Sarah can raise her eyebrows. That's how I know. It's getting spicy.
Wait for the ducks to start flying.
I didn't even know they did it that much.
I should have a t-shirt. Oh, this is a 3/4 inch eyebrow. Baby.
I thought it would be more like how much Sarah can glare at James. Well, apparently earlier all they could see were my eyes and eyebrows.
Oh, is that angled up?
It was angled funky.
Sorry, I had it using it the other day.
That's
Cool.
okay.
Well, I think that will about do it. I want to say a huge thank you for coming out. So if you have a topic you'd like to see us do or something that would make a good one-on-one, let us know. And we'll have fun until next time. So until then, have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.